I'd like to invite you to imagine a society of human beings who all believe pretty much the same as each other and who persecute people with new ideas. How would that be? Now imagine that society gradually evolves so that there's growing numbers of people with an open ideational system generating new ideas. And that those who generate the best new ideas are celebrated. How would that be? And now imagine that that openness to new good ideas keeps increasing, actually exponentially increasing. But as well, more and more human beings start to feel a deep communion with everything and everyone, which brings out the best in them and makes them want to bring out the best in others and for others. How would that be? Now, at the very beginning of this book, I said, look, a new understanding is coming. Of course it will. It always has. That will lead to a new human, and that will lead to a new world. And what I want to explore in this chapter is, look, I think we've come from that first culture, which you could call collectivism, because we, in that stage, thought collectively. That has moved into individualism, which is what we're in now. And that's because we're becoming more and more individual. And where it's heading is unividualism. And to make that seem plausible, I'd like to take a moment to really get how far we've come in that transition from collectivism to individualism. And I've called it the scientific revolution many times, but actually it's happening not just with knowledge gathering, it's happening with everything. So we have seen the explosion of scientific knowledge, where people have come up with new ideas, and that's led to new technology like we're on right now, and everything has happened. And that's affected medicine, our health, so that we don't expect most of our kids to die anymore. How wonderful is that? We have hope that we could live a decent length life. How amazing is that? But it's not just in knowledge gathering, it's also in the arts. Once people took on an open system, we started celebrating the artistic genius who comes along with a brand new way of making music, never been heard before, brand new way of doing art, brand new way of doing poetry, theatre, all of it. Economics. Huge. Most of history, human beings have been a bit richer, a bit poorer, a bit richer, a bit poorer. And then we get the individual entrepreneur who sees an opportunity, a new idea, makes it happen. And through that process, wow, we have become so much richer. Economists call it the hockey stick because it just goes and we're still going up. An extraordinary expansion of wealth around the world, actually, now, increasingly. And in politics, instead of treating each other in where we fall in these rigid groups, you're this, you're in this class, you're this, you play this role, you do the same as your parents did, all of that. We've got the modern individual, where we aspire at least to equal opportunity, wherever you come from, where we increasingly believe we should treat each other as individuals. Doesn't matter what race you are, doesn't matter what you believe, doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman or what your sexual preference, you are an individual and should be treated as such. This is revolutionary. We get to take it for granted very quickly, but I've seen these changes happen in my own lifetime, so that my daughter's coming into a different world than I came into, and absolutely different to the ones that her ancestors came into. And I want to suggest what's actually changed here in this transition from the collective to the individualistic is the emergence of better psi-sensing. Now, I've said that psi-sensing is how the system looks at itself, looks at its own processing. But it learns to do that to begin with, I think, in quite a superficial way, as you would expect. And then what's happened is it's learned to do it deeper. So in a superficial way, you might be able to argue, for instance, about should we do this or this based on the acceptance that the Bible is the absolute truth, for example. It takes a much deeper jump of reflection to go, is the Bible the absolute truth? Maybe that's wrong. And as we do that, that's where science has taken off and so forth. And so the individual has come from individuals reflecting deeper and deeper and deeper and beginning to develop their own ideational system, not just believing the same thing that they were taught, their conditioning, believing what everyone else believes. And now I want to suggest, as we move into this next transition into unividualism, it's also an increase in psi-sensing. But now it's not the psi-sensing of the individual system, although that does need to carry on and get deeper for sure. But it's psi-sensing in this more general spiritual way that I've discussed. That we're psi-sensing the oneness of all things. We're psi-sensing the unividual communion. So I would like to suggest we're seeing that happen. That in my own lifetime, I've seen an increase in the number of people who feel like it's one human family. That's not there in history. People now genuinely care about people on the other side of the world who are suffering they'll never meet. Why? Never happened before. Because we're beginning to get, we're all individuals, and in that way we're all one. We're all one humanity. We should treat each other like that. It's a huge change. We're one with nature. Nature's not there for us to just make use of. We're one with it. You have human beings who give up their lives to serving another species. Cross-species compassion. Astonishing. And also, still small, but increasing rapidly, I think, more and more people have this spiritual oneness and connection with the supersoul. Now, often I don't think people understand what that is, hence the work I'm doing to try and elucidate what I think that is. But nevertheless, it's happening. So the claim for this next transition from individualism to unividualism is, look, more and more unividuals committed to loving wisely will emerge, and that will just create a more emergent world. Of course it will. Now, I know that it's easy to respond to that with skepticism. Like, really? You think so? Have you looked at the world recently? The state it's in? And I want to suggest this comes from the nature of consciousness. That it evolved, as we discussed many chapters back now, as a way of focusing on what matters and processing that in high definition. Well, what really matters to any system is danger. So it's no surprise that if there's perceived danger, we focus on it. And that's what we do today when we're looking at the news. We focus on danger. But that can blind us to everything else that's going really, really well. So just as individually, I need to step back from all of my focusing on what needs to be done, what problems need to be solved, to stand back every now and again and go, yeah, but let's appreciate how good everything else is. Everything that's going well. How lucky am I? What I'm trying to do in this chapter is do the same thing and go, okay, yeah, I know that danger and we need to focus on that and we'd be stupid not to. And as well, just stand back and look at how far we have come and how much better in so many ways it is. I think there's two ways of looking at the human being, one of which is kind of cynical and the other's naive. And the view I'm exploring, I think, avoids both of those. And the cynical version goes, yeah, but, human nature doesn't change. We've always been violent and selfish, and we always will be in the future. And this evolutionary view goes, no, we're evolving. That's in us. We'd be stupid to ignore it. But we haven't been the same. We're not the same as we were. We're absolutely not. And we can be very different again in the future. But it also avoids this kind of naive thing, which is what often causes the cynical reaction. That naive thing which goes, oh, human beings, they're just perfect, really. And, maybe that mean that in a spiritual sense, or it could be just we're born perfect. And then society or our parents mess us up. And if we could get rid of that bad conditioning, we'd all be perfect and it'd be fantastic. And this evolutionary view goes, no, that's not true either. We come with our passivity and we're evolving. But we can evolve into these more emergent states. We can become better and better human beings. And we have. And we have every reason to think that we will. But I have to say, for myself, it's not really the study of history, seeing how we've come, that's the primary reason I'm optimistic, although it helps. It really, for me, comes from going up. When I come into that universal communion, when I process things from there, the intuition that arises is profoundly hopeful. Now, it can be naive. We discussed that. And you're ignoring the nature of reality. But if you don't ignore the nature of reality, if you accept that and that you're working with that, it can also be realistic. It may be naive to think it's just going to happen, like in a lot of spiritual ideas. The ascension is happening. It'll happen on this special date. And not that. Or it would be naive to think it's going to happen just now, tomorrow. But it would be cynical to think it can never happen. I'm reminded of things in the past again. It was once naive to think that slavery would ever end. A lot of people were against it. They just couldn't see how you could exist without it. It's so embedded in the very fabric of the ancient economy of the ancient world, for instance. People have always had slaves. Always, 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 always. That wouldn't change. But it did. It did change. So what I've hoped to gesture towards is a hopeful vision of the future in this chapter. Because, with the losing of traditional religion, we lost, for many people, the hope of a better life after death. Oh, it's bad now, but it will be better later. That went. And then I think we began in the last century to lose the vision of a better society. And I think that largely comes from the failure of communism, where there was this huge, the influence of Marxist ideas is so big. And it's a beautiful vision on the face of it, or it seems like it might be. It's why it's so attractive. And then it led to utter, utter disaster and levels of suffering, which is hard to put your head in. And so that hope seems naive now. Oh yeah, we thought that, and this is what it led to. But here is the essential reason I think it failed. Was because it was actually a return to collectivism. It wasn't going forward. It was going, oh, look, we've got all of these problems of individualism now. We need to serve the collective. We've become too individualistic. And by going back, it suppressed the individual in service of the state, of the collective. It suppressed economic individuality in terms of the power of the state to run the economy. It suppressed the individual developing their own unique ideas in terms of what the state said was the official line. And so, of course, it failed. It took things back. But what I'm suggesting is not that at all. I'm suggesting, no, the individual is the foundation. Keep that going. Increase that. More open system. More new ideas. And with that, allow this up to start to form. The individual human beings going up and loving wisely, contributing, wanting to serve something greater. You know, there's a lot of problems with individualism. Not just the ones we've just seen. There has been a rejection of service for self, a narcissism, because we've lost religion. There's been a hedonism. Party while you can, because you think you're going to die and that's the end. There's a vacuous celebrity because we don't know what's of value. There's a disenchantment because we don't go into these more emergent states where the world is utterly beautiful. But all of this becomes solved by the return of spirituality in a new way. You know, a lot of people think, oh, we're losing something because we're losing religion, and they're right. But the solution isn't to go back. It's to go forward into a new post-scientific spirituality where we can reconnect with all of these powerful experiences of an emergent spiritual reality level in a new way. Okay, so what have I been exploring? I'm going, look, if you stand back far enough, you can see a very simple movement between a closed system society coming into an open system, individualistic society, heading for a unividual society. And that if you can really see, I'm suggesting, how far we've come in the last few hundred years, especially and more and more and more so as time goes by, then you can perhaps be open to, oh, so where could this go then if we've come this far? But that requires us to step back enough that we don't just see our own time and think it's always been like this, because it hasn't. And we don't just focus on what's dangerous or negative, important as that is, but we get the bigger picture and go, whoa, okay, if we can do that, we can do this. We can move into this next phase of our collective evolution. And how's that going to happen? Well, I'm reminded of Walt Whitman, who was a great product of that individualization, who was also a kind of prophet of the unividual to come, I think. And he said in one of his poems, produce great persons, the rest follows. There it is. That's it. As we emerge individually into this, as we go up and love wisely, and as more and more people do that, the rest follows. Society is the interaction of the people in it. If they start interacting in a new way, society will become a different society. As it becomes a different society, it will become easier for more and more people to interact in that new way, and you set up a virtuous circle. That's what's happened before. It's got us here. That's what's going to happen again. So that I think we can sit here and imagine what it might be like for future generations to look back on us in the same way that we've been looking back at the past. And just like we've been going, wow, in such a short time, really, we got from there to here. And that they will be the same. Oh, wow. Look at the transformations that they could hardly dream of, which have led us from there to where we are now. Join me in the next chapter, where I'm going to give a resume of all the ideas we've been exploring so far in this pod book and how they fit together and support each other. And I'm going to do that by answering the three big questions of philosophy. And let me also say, you've come a long way with me to reach this chapter. And if you find the ideas that I'm exploring of value, please think about supporting me taking this into the world. And you can do that financially by making a donation or joining my online community and becoming actively involved in the process of taking it into the world. And you can do both of those on my website.